Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now in today's video I'm going to show you two ways I use kebab rigs to try and catch big pike. I've just got down to the reservoir. I need to walk around, try and find the spot that I want to fish first, and then throughout this video I'll go into a lot more detail about how I set these kebab rigs up, and hopefully I'll show a few fish along the way. So the first swim I've decided to fish from is a swim that I've had some really good success at the start of this season. In fact, if you saw my more recent videos, you would have seen me catch a few really nice double figure pike from here. And it seems like an area where there's always a few fish hanging around. So it seems like a good place to start. But like I said in the intro, today I'm using solely kebab rigs. And if you're not sure what a kebab rig is, it's basically a plastic stick that you can thread some pieces of bait on and attach that to your hook. I'm going to be presenting these kebab rigs in two different ways today, which I'll show you throughout this video. Right now though, it's time to get set up and get some baits in the water. Well, I nearly had a fish to show you then. As I like to do when I'm bringing in the float rod, I'll twitch it back. So I'll reel in a couple of times, let it settle, reel a bit more, let it settle. And as I was doing that, a pike took it on the way in. So that fish must have been hanging around the area, and that little bit of movement obviously enticed it to strike. Unfortunately, not too far away from the bank, the hook came out of his mouth and the fish was gone. But it does prove the point. It's always a really good idea to use that twitch technique just to see if there was a fish hanging around and try and entice that bite before you bring the bait back in. So what I'm going to do now, I'll freshen up that bait and I'll show you exactly how to set up the float rod. Right, so here's my float fishing setup for fishing the kebab rig that nearly brought me the first fish. Unfortunately it came off just before I managed to get in the net. So by my thumb here, I've just got a float stop. So that can slide up and down the line so I can easily adjust the depth I want to fish at. Following that is a little black bead, and then my floats. This is just a standard cheap sea fishing float. Nothing complicated, runs all the way through with another bead coming after that, which just protects it from knocking against my weight. And I've got another bead followed by my swivel clip. Again, I've got about 2 foot of my wire trace. Again, it's a nice supple one. And again, I've got my kebab rig attached to one of the treble hooks. On this kebab rig, I'm fishing mackerel. Again, I've got some bigger pieces at the bottom and they get smaller towards the top. You can see my hooks are nicely exposed. I'm not too worried about getting the bait right to the top. If it works out that way, then great. If there's a bit of a gap, I don't seem to find it makes much of a difference. So you notice on this kebab rig, there's no polyball on it. That's because I'm float fishing it. I don't want it to be popped up. That's going to naturally sink and the float is going to hold it in position. So I've got about 2 foot of wire trace to begin with, and I'm going to have my float stop tight up against the float to start with, so I know that I'll be fishing about 2 foot of depth. If I don't catch anything, each cast I can simply slide that float stop up my line so the float will sit higher up, and then I can make it 3 foot depth or 4 foot depth, and I can keep going until my float is no longer drifting along, which will mean that my bait is actually then in the weed, it's caught on the weed and it can no longer move. In which case I will make the depth a little bit shallower again so that bait is literally just above the weed drifting along. Once I find the sort of depth that the fish feel comfortable feeding at, I can stick to that and hopefully I'll get a lot more and quicker bites. Right, let's get that out there. I'll talk to you in a little bit more detail about how I'm fishing these two different styles in this swim. So in every swim I'll be fishing today, I'll be trying to make the maximum of the water in front of me. So I'll be setting my rods up in a particular way. Now the wind is pushing to my left hand side, which means my float will also be drifting across to my left. So I don't really want my float heading towards my ledger deadbait. It's going to risk the chance of tangles, especially if I get a fish on. So I've got my ledger deadbait to my right hand side. That's obviously static. That's out there, out the way. I'll then cast my float rod towards it, but not too close towards it, so that it can drift away from it down towards my left hand side. That's then going to cover a lot of water, and what I'll tend to do every couple of minutes is I'll just give it a little twitch, maybe bring it a little bit closer. So over the course of a couple of hours, my bait should be going across all parts of the water in front of me, hopefully finding a pike or two. And of course, like I said earlier, before I do reel in, I will give it a few twitches, reel it in a little bit, a few twitches, reel it in a little bit, almost like I'm lure fishing, because if there's a fish that's attracted to the bait but hasn't decided to pick it up, then that little bit of movement might entice it to strike and take that hook bait, which is exactly what happened earlier. Unfortunately, it came off before I could land it. Okay, I think we're into a fish. Yeah, there we go. Fish on. Nice positive take. The line was peeling away. Let's give it a good pull back, so hopefully it's a half decent fish. Problem is, there's always going to be a lot of weed on there, so it's hard to tell exactly how big it's going to be, but feels weighty. But yeah, there's quite a bit of weed on there. Let's try and kick away from it. Looks like it's going to be a half decent fish. Alright, there we go. First fish off the session. I just lost one on the float kebab. This is on the running ledger setup, and I'll show you both of those in a second. Yeah, it hasn't taken long. I was just doing a bit to camera to say that in that half an hour I was going to redo both the rods. Luckily, I left them out there a little bit longer, because if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't have caught this one. Yeah, 95 centimetre pike, touching double. Yeah, I might say it's just about a double. Yeah, another cracking example of the fish in here. Beautiful colours and a very healthy, hard fighting fish. Yeah, let's get this one back and I'll show you the running ledger setup before I get that bait back out there. And she's kicking away, so let's let her go. Back to her home. Off she goes. Beautiful. Right, so before we get the rod back out there, let's take a look at the rig that caught that lovely double figure pike. Now, I'm using a running ledger setup on this rod. So I've got a stem that can freely run up and down my braided main line, and my lead is attached to that via a clip. At the end of my braid, I've got a swivel clip that I can quickly attach my wire trace to via a swivel. Then I've got about 2 foot of nice supple wire trace. The reason for that is it's going to follow any contours of the weed or any debris on the bottom. It's just going to help present my bait a bit better. I've then got some shot weight, which is to help sink the bait, because I've got an oversized poly ball on the end of my kebab rig. The kebab rig simply attaches onto one of the hooks, which is barbed, and I've got a bait flag there to help keep it all in place. The other 2 hooks on that treble hook are barbless. So that is the rig in simple terms. I will go into it in a lot more detail throughout the video. For now though, let's get it back out there and see if we can get another fish. Right, so the float has reached the end of its drift, so it's time to bring it in and recast it. Like I said, I'm just going to give it a few twitches on the way in, So just keeping the line tight, just twitch it in towards me. And I'll do that all the way to my feet because a pike might follow it in and take it at the last minute. Or just let the bait settle every now and again. So it's like a very slow retrieve. And that's got caught up in some weed. Alright, so not that time. But the bait is fine. Just take a little bit of weed off it. And because I had no action, I'm going to take that float stop up by about a foot. So I'm fishing a little bit deeper. I'm going to try that. Right, so let's take a look at how I use this Kebab rig on my ledger setup in a bit more detail. Now you notice I've got a nice big poly ball at the top there. I actually took the original one off because I wanted to oversize the buoyancy of that Kebab rig. Because I'm fishing in weed, I didn't want this to drop down too quickly. I'd rather have extra buoyancy and use the shot weight to slowly bring that bait down to the lake bed. If there wasn't enough buoyancy in the Kebab rig to begin with, it could sink too quickly and those hooks could get caught up in the weed and I wouldn't be fishing very effectively. Right, so in my hand here I've got some chopped up sardine. I'm using several different sizes for good reason. What I want to do, I want to have the bigger pieces up towards where the poly ball is and then slowly decrease the size of those baits the closer I get to the hook. That is to keep the hook nice and exposed. The more hook that's exposed, the greater chance of hooking those fish. So all I'll do is I'll take one piece at a time and just thread it on to the kebab stick, making sure the next piece is smaller than the previous piece. Like so. So I've got 4 pieces on there, still get my hook through the hole of the kebab stick, so that is good to go. Right guys, I gave it another half an hour or so. In that first swim where I caught that double figure pike, I decided to have a little move. So it went quiet, had no more action, so I thought I'd come and try and find the fish. Now I've come over to kind of the opposite side to where I was fishing, so I'm more on the back of the wind now, which has made it a lot more comfortable for me. As you see, I've taken my coat off, and hopefully that means it's more comfortable for the bait fish to hold up in this water, and then hopefully the pike have followed them and they're hanging around as well. So that's kind of my thought process of why I've moved here. Now you'll notice that I'm using my extra long bank sticks in this swim, and that's because there's an old bed of lilies just out in front of me. I don't want my line running through that. I want to try and keep it up out of the water as much as possible. So I've got a nice high rod and the line is just going over the top of those lilies, so they shouldn't affect my line lay at all. The lilies are dying back, so I'm not worried about bringing a fish through there. I have done it recently and had no problems. As long as you keep steady pressure, don't pull too hard, and just keep that fish's head up, it will come through there, no problem at all. I've got about 2 hours left of fishing, so again I'll keep the rods in the water for 45 minutes or so and do a couple of recasts, probably the float rod every half hour or so. Fingers crossed I can get another fish, hopefully on that float setup, just to show you that works as well. Like I said, I did lose a fish on that setup earlier, but it would be nice to have one in my hands to show you. Let's see what happens. Hopefully there's one more before I go home. I've set my rods up in the same sort of way, but the opposite way around this time because I'm on the opposite bank. So my running ledger is on the right hand side and my float rod is on the left. So the float can drift down to the left hand side without interfering with the running ledger setup. Again, it's very weedy out there, so I've still got that poly ball on top of my kebab rig, using no shot weight to slowly sink it down, and that bait should just nestle on top of the weed. Right, whilst there's little action on the rods, just thought I'd take a minute to say thank you to everyone who is supporting the channel at the moment. I am trying to upload videos a bit more regularly, and I really hope you're enjoying the videos. I really appreciate it when you comment, when you like the videos, and of course subscribe to the channel, which helps make it grow. I am about 90 subscribers away for reaching that magic 1,000 mark, which will hopefully mean then I can bring you even more videos. So yeah, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it, and it makes a world of difference when you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and comment on the videos as well. Right, back to the fishing. Right, so again, this is what I'm talking about. All that weed out there that my bait will be getting tangled up in. But I'll bring my hook bait up. You see there's a little bit of weed on there that probably would have caught as I was dragging it through. So yeah, that poly ball on the Kebab Rig, it's doing its job. It's keeping my bait fishing effectively, even though I'm fishing in this stuff. Let's get back out there. Now, you might be wondering why you should use a Kebab Rig over a standard whole bait. Like I said earlier, I am using mackerel and sardine, and both of them are really oily, smelly fish that give off a great scent in the water. So by themselves, they are a great bait. I'm sure if you've used them, you will have caught on them yourselves. However, if you're cutting them up and putting them onto your kebab stick, you are releasing those scents, those smells, those oils a lot quicker and a lot more density. So if you're having a tough session, it might make the difference between catching a fish or not, because by releasing all that attraction quicker in the water, you're going to hopefully attract those fish to it and nick yourself a bite. And even if the fishing isn't tough, it's still a great way of attracting those fish in quicker and maybe enticing them that little bit more to take your bait. What I also like about Kebab Rigs is how easy they are to use and set up. So sometimes when you're using dead baits, especially if you're trying to pop them up, it can be a little bit of a faff, especially on a cold day when your hands are freezing cold. Whereas with a Kebab Rig, you can simply cut up your bait nice and quickly, shove it onto the stick, attach it to your hook, and now it goes. So yeah, it's a very quick and simple way of presenting your bait. And the third thing I like about the Kebab Rigs is that you can use up your old bait with them. So quite often when you're fishing your dead baits, whole or half baits, you're going to have bits of bait left over. And rather than chuck them in the bin or chuck them in the lake, cut them up into the right size pieces, stick them in the freezer, and you're good to go for your next session. So you're not wasting any bait and you're saving money too. What's more, as I've proved so far, they're a very effective way of catching fish. I'll just cut the clip. Yeah, I think there might be something there. Let's have a tip. No, I don't think so. Right, I'm not sure what happened there, but the rod definitely pulled down and the line came out the clip and a little bit of line started going. Can't see any damage to any of the pieces of the fish, but maybe something picked it up and let it go again. Maybe it's a sign there's a fish or two around. I'm seeing quite a lot of bait fish swirling around, so I think I've made the right move to come here. If there's bait fish here, there should be some pike here. But yeah, bait's looking alright, so I can get that straight back out there. Try again. So time has unfortunately run out and it's time to end my session. The purpose of this video was to show you the effectiveness of the Kebab Rigs, and hopefully I've done that. I did manage to catch that lovely double figure pike earlier on in the session by using the Kebab Rig to prop up my bait just above the weed. I also lost a fish on the float. I think the Kebab Rig obviously drew a fish in, and as I was twitching it back in, enticed the pike to strike. So unfortunately that fish came off. So although I didn't have a fish on each rod, I hopefully have shown you that both methods are an effective way to catch fish. Like I said earlier, it's a quick and effective way of presenting your bait. It gets loads of smell and attraction in the area, and it's a good way to use up your leftover bait as well. It's definitely a technique worth trying. If you haven't done so already, go give it a go and see how you get on. Thank you very much for watching the video and for supporting the channel. Like I said earlier, really appreciate everybody who likes the videos, comments on the videos, subscribes to the channel. Really does mean a lot to me, so thank you very much. Really hope you enjoy watching them, and hopefully I'll catch you guys again soon.